The galaxy was old, older than any one race could count. Great empires had risen and fallen in the stars. Some species became conquerors, others became slaves, and some simply vanished into history. Among the countless names that drifted like dust in forgotten records, there was one word that still echoed faintly in libraries, ruins, and old war songs: humanity. But to most living in the present era, human was nothing more than a myth. They were spoken of in taverns as campfire stories, the kind of tales traders used to entertain children during long hyperspace journeys. Some said humans were too reckless and fragile to ever survive space. Others claimed they were dreamers who flew too close to the sun and burned themselves out. To the galaxy's proudest civilizations, humanity was a fairy tale. A minor species that had once existed but vanished long ago, leaving no trace. The great powers laughed whenever the name was spoken. Terrans, a bedtime story. We are the real rulers of the stars. So it was believed. The War of the Coalitions, the galaxy was never at peace for long. Two vast coalitions of worlds fought for control of star systems, resources, and trade routes. The first, the Valar Dominion, prided itself on order, hierarchy, and massive fleets of warships. The second, the Zereth Compact, was a looser alliance of species bound by fear of the Dominion's expansion. Their war consumed countless lives. Entire worlds were turned into ash, fleets burned in orbit, and billions were displaced. Yet neither side could break the other. Every battle ended with more scars on the galaxy's face. It was during this war on a lonely border outpost that whispers of a forgotten race began to stir again. Strange fighters. The outpost belonged to the Zereth Compact. It was a small mining world, unimportant except for the rare metals hidden in its crust. Dominion forces attacked, expecting an easy victory. Their ships swept down from orbit, their armored troops marching through the colony streets with machines at their side. But resistance came, not just from compact soldiers, but from strange fighters no one recognized. They wore mismatched armor and used weapons that looked patched together from salvage, yet they moved with purpose. They fought in ways the Dominion had never seen, hitting supply lines instead of front lines, setting traps instead of holding ground, striking fast and disappearing into ruins like ghosts. The compact survivors told wild stories afterward. They fought like nothing I've seen. Their bodies were not armored like ours. They looked softer, fragile, but they did not break. One commander laughed at the reports. You speak of phantoms. You imagine things after battle. But the stories spread anyway. The soldiers said these strange fighters called themselves humans. Laughter across the stars. When the rumor reached the higher councils of the compact, it caused only laughter. Humans? Impossible. They are not real. Perhaps deserters making up a name to frighten their enemies. The Dominion scoffed even louder when they heard, "Humans are children's tales." They sneered. The compact has grown desperate if they pretend fairy tales fight for them. For both coalitions it was a joke, a distraction from the endless war, and yet the rumor would not die. Reports kept arriving. Fighters with strange tactics, survivors with eyes that held a fierce light. A word whispered on burning battlefields: Terran. A survivor's memory. On a medical frigate, a wounded compact officer lay recovering. His squad had been saved during a raid by those unknown fighters. He remembered them clearly, even through the pain. They were not machines, not clones, not mercenaries. They were people, and they fought with fire in their souls. When one fell, the others did not retreat. They became fiercer, like a storm breaking free. I saw one of them run into a Dominion war machine with nothing but explosives strapped to his chest. He gave his life without hesitation. The healers asked him why. The officer's eyes darkened. He looked at me before he charged. He smiled. And he said, "This is what humans do." The hidden colonies far from the war's front lines, beyond the mapped trade routes, there were forgotten stars. Worlds where no Dominion or compact ship had traveled in centuries. There, hidden in the quiet dark, humanity had endured. The old Earth had been lost long ago, its history buried under catastrophe and exile. The humans who fled scattered across distant systems, carving out life on harsh worlds. For generations they had been shadows. Traders, wanderers, scavengers who never spoke their true name. But in their silence, they learned. They built ships from scraps. They adapted to every hostile world. They taught their children the stories of survival and the oath never to forget. One day, humanity will return to the stars, and now, the war tearing the galaxy apart had become their chance. Watching the galaxy on one hidden colony, a gathering of human leaders studied holoscreens filled with battle reports. The galaxy did not know them, but they knew the galaxy. They had watched the rise of the Dominion and the Compact from afar. They had prepared in secret for the day they would reveal themselves. "They think we are only a story," one leader said with a grim smile. "That is our greatest weapon." Another leaned forward. "If we step onto the battlefield now, we must show them what humans are. Not myths, not shadows, survivors, fighters, builders. They must see us and never forget again." Around the table, silent nods answered. Humanity had waited long enough. A first step, the first human soldiers to reveal themselves, did not arrive with a fleet. They came quietly in small bands, helping compact colonies resist Dominion raids. They did not fight for the Compact, nor swear loyalty to their flag. They fought because they chose to, and they fought like no one else. Compact soldiers began to whisper among themselves. "They are unpredictable. They fight without fear. I saw one use fire against Dominion armor, fire in this age of plasma weapons. They are not bound by rules of war. They change the battlefield itself." And though commanders dismissed it, ordinary soldiers began to hope. Maybe these strange allies could turn the tide. The galaxy's blindness, yet still in the halls of power the name human, was nothing but mockery. The Dominion Chancellor waved away the reports. If the Compact truly had such fighters, they would send them to the core battles. No, this is a trick or desperate propaganda. The Compact Council debated, but most agreed. If such a species existed, we would have records. Humanity is a myth, nothing more. So the galaxy turned its eyes back to its war, blind to the storm that was gathering. A fire that could not be hidden, but on the front lines, truth burned brighter with every battle. Small Dominion units were destroyed by forces they could not predict. Supply convoys vanished into traps. Command posts were struck in daring raids no other species would attempt. And when survivors crawled back to their fleets, they all spoke the same words. They called themselves humans. At first, their commanders punished them for spreading lies. But as more survivors told the same story, doubt began to creep in. Could it be possible? Could the myths be true? The whisper of fear in the dark halls of Dominion warships. Soldiers muttered uneasily. They say the humans never stop, that even if you kill one, another rises to take his place. They fight as if death does not matter. Perhaps they are not flesh at all. Perhaps they are demons wearing soft skins. Fear, once a joke, began to spread. And fear is a dangerous weapon. The return of a name somewhere in the galaxy. A single world was liberated, not by the Compact, not by any grand fleet, but by a handful of human fighters and the colonists they inspired. The last Dominion banners burned. And when the dust settled, the colonists carved a new word onto their rebuilt gates. Humanity stood here. The galaxy still dismissed the name. Still scoffed. Still mocked. But on that battlefield, the forgotten species had returned, and the war was about to change forever. The war between the Velar Dominion and the Zerath Compact dragged on like a wound that would not heal. Whole fleets clashed in deep space, and planets became nothing more than battlegrounds. But in the shadow of this war, small stories began to move across the stars. Stories about strange fighters who called themselves humans. At first, these were only rumors. But as more soldiers returned from the front, whispers turned into quiet conversations, and quiet conversations began to carry weight. A soldier's tale on a mining colony recently freed from Dominion control. A group of compact soldiers gathered around a fire. The colony had been reduced to ruins, broken towers, burnt machines, and streets filled with ash. The soldiers were exhausted, their uniforms torn, their eyes haunted. But tonight they spoke not of defeat. They spoke of the strangers who had appeared in their darkest hour. "I swear to you," one young soldier said, his voice sharp with conviction. "They were not like anyone I've seen before. They moved like shadows but fought like storms." One of them threw himself onto a Dominion walker with explosives strapped to his chest. He destroyed it in fire, and when I asked him why, he only said, "Because humans don't run." The others looked at him in silence. "You're saying they were humans?" Another soldier asked doubtfully. The young soldier nodded. "That's what they called themselves, humans. A grizzled veteran spat into the dust. Fairy tales. I heard stories of humans when I was a child. Fragile creatures, weak and short-lived. If they existed at all, they were wiped out centuries ago. Then how do you explain what we saw? The young soldier demanded. The veteran hesitated. For all his years of battle, he had no answer. A council's mockery while soldiers on the front whispered in awe. The leaders of the compact treated the stories as little more than foolishness. In a tall chamber lit by cold blue light, council members debated strategy. The Dominion pushes harder every cycle, one said. We must request more ships from our allies, another snorted. Allies, we are stretched thin. We cannot even protect our borders. It was then that a junior officer dared to speak. There are reports of irregular fighters. They do not fly our banners, but they have aided several colonies. Survivors say they call themselves humans. For a moment the chamber was silent. Then laughter broke out. Humans? Impossible. They are myths. Officer, do not waste our time with children's stories. Focus on facts, not fairy tales. The young officer lowered his eyes, ashamed. But inside he kept the memory of the reports. He had read every account, every detail. They could not all be lies. The Dominion's pride on the other side of the war. The Valar Dominion also heard the whispers. Reports from their commanders described raids unlike any they had seen. Convoys vanished, patrols were slaughtered, and strongholds that should have been unbreakable were destroyed. Survivors spoke of fragile-looking warriors who fought with impossible bravery. The Dominion Chancellor read the reports with cold eyes. This is the Compact's trick, he declared. They invent a ghost army to give their soldiers courage. Humans do not exist. The Chamber of Dominion generals bowed in agreement. None dared question him. But in the lower ranks, soldiers exchanged nervous glances. They had heard too many stories to dismiss. The human wayfarer from both councils, on the hidden colonies where humanity had survived in silence for generations, men and women gathered in their makeshift command centers. They watched intercepted transmissions. They studied the disbelief of the Dominion and the Compact. And they smiled. They don't believe we exist, one commander said. Good, another replied. That means they will not be ready when we step into the light. The humans had lived in hiding for too long, forced into silence to protect themselves. But now the galaxy was at war, and the time had come to return. Not as myths, not as stories, but as living proof. A battle remembered. The true change began on a small agricultural world named Jorith's Reach. Dominion forces descended in overwhelming numbers. The compact garrison prepared to surrender. They were too few to resist. Families huddled in fear, believing the end had come, and then the humans appeared. They struck first at night using only the shadows and their courage. They had no great machines, no warships to match the Dominion fleet, but they knew the land, and they knew how to fight with what little they had. They collapsed bridges, poisoned supply tanks, and turned farm tools into weapons. When the Dominion marched into the fields, the humans led them into traps. Compact soldiers, inspired by this sudden resistance, found their courage again and joined the fight. By the time the Dominion withdrew, bloodied and humiliated, the colony still stood, and etched into the walls of the main settlement. The survivors carved words for all to see. Humans fought here. The shock of witnesses' news spread quickly. The compact soldiers who had fought beside the humans returned with wild eyes and stories they could not stop repeating. They are not like us. They bleed, yes, but they do not fear. They fight as if every battle is the last one of their lives. They turn the land itself into their weapon. Even ruins become their allies. They fight not for orders, not for politics, but for each other, for survival. At first, commanders dismissed these as exaggerations, but the number of similar reports grew too large to ignore. The growing fear on Dominion ships, soldiers whispered among themselves. They say the humans cannot be broken. They say they laugh in the face of death. I heard one walked into plasma fire just to protect his comrades. Fear began to creep into the Dominion's iron discipline. The more they denied the existence of humans, the more the story spread. It was as though the very idea of humanity was enough to inspire hope in some and dread in others. A human meeting in a hidden base beneath the surface of a barren moon, human leaders gathered again. Their ships were old, their weapons patched and repaired, but their eyes burned with the fire of a people who had survived when no one believed they could. They are starting to believe the rumors, one leader said. Another nodded. That is enough. Belief is power. The Dominion fears us even as they call us stories. The Compact hopes for us even as their leaders mock the idea. And soon, the first leader said, we will give them proof. The galaxy will see us with their own eyes. The beginning of a legend as the cycle turned. More battles carried the mark of humanity. Raids grew bolder, strikes deeper. Colonies that had given up hope found themselves standing again, thanks to the hands of fighters who once hid in the shadows. Everywhere they fought, the same word echoed, whispered in awe and fear alike. Humans. No longer just a story. No longer just a forgotten name. Something had begun. A legend was walking back into the galaxy step by step, battlefield by battlefield. And the war would never be the same again. The galaxy's war burned hotter with every passing cycle. The Velar Dominion and the Zerath Compact fought across star systems, each side desperate to break the other. Fleets clashed above burning worlds and armies marched across shattered cities. Yet beneath the noise of war, a quiet truth was spreading. The humans were real. At first, only whispers carried their name. Then came rumors. Then came frightened reports from soldiers who had faced them. And now, at last, the galaxy was about to see them with its own eyes. A broken world. The world of Krezar IV had once been full of forests and bright rivers, but war had turned it into a wasteland. Dominion forces had landed with overwhelming numbers, burning the land and scattering the Compact defenders. Towns lay in ruins and the skies were filled with smoke. A small group of Compact survivors huddled in the wreckage of an old warehouse. Their commander, a scarred officer named Terran, looked around at his weary soldiers. We cannot hold this world, Terran said quietly. The Dominion will crush us by morning. One of his men asked, then we retreat? Terran's jaw tightened. There is nowhere to retreat to. Our transports are gone. We are finished here. Hopeless silence filled the room. The soldiers lowered their heads, ready to accept the end. That was when they heard a new voice. Finished? No, you are not finished. From the shadows stepped a figure in battered armor. His helmet was old, scratched by many battles, and his rifle looked patched together from different parts. Yet he carried himself with the calm of someone who had survived too much to fear death. Terran soldiers raised their weapons in alarm. Who are you? Terran demanded. The stranger lifted his helmet, revealing tired eyes and a face marked by scars. He smiled faintly. The name does not matter. What matters is this: we are human, and we fight with you. The first sight by dawn, the Dominion launched their final assault. Columns of armored walkers marched across the ruins, their weapons blasting apart walls and towers. Compact soldiers fired back, but their resistance was weak, scattered, and then the humans appeared. They came out of the smoke, moving in small teams. Their weapons were crude compared to Dominion plasma rifles, but they used them with deadly skill. They struck from rooftops, from tunnels, from hidden trenches they had dug in the night. Explosives shattered the walkers' legs. Fire and smoke turned the streets into traps. Where the Dominion expected retreat, the humans attacked again and again, vanishing only to strike from another angle. Compact soldiers watched in awe. These fragile-looking fighters with no heavy armor and no great machines fought as if they could not be broken. Are they mad? One soldier whispered. No. Another replied, staring at the humans who charged even as fire fell around them. They are different. The broadcast, the Battle of Krezar IV, was recorded. Compact scouts had set up hidden transmitters, and every moment of the fight was sent across the stars. The galaxy saw it, billions of beings, from traders in quiet stations to rulers in shining capitals, watched the images with disbelief. They saw humans for the first time in centuries, flesh and blood standing where legends said none remained. They watched humans charge Dominion machines with only courage and fire. They watched them fight side by side with Compact soldiers, turning a hopeless defense into a living storm. For the first time, the myth had a face. The shockwave's reaction spread quickly. In Compact cities, ordinary people cheered. The humans are real, they shouted. We are not alone against the Dominion. Hope flared where before there had been despair. In Dominion halls, anger boiled. The Chancellor slammed a fist against the table as the recordings played before him. Lies, he roared. This is fabrication. Clever tricks. These are not humans, they cannot be. But even as he spoke, doubt grew in the hearts of his soldiers. The images were too clear, too raw, too alive. On neutral worlds, merchants and wanderers whispered, "If humans have returned, the war will change. Perhaps the galaxy itself will change." The human camp after the battle. The compact survivors who had fought beside the humans were brought to their camp. It was not a grand base, only a gathering of tents and scavenged machines. But there was something powerful in the air, something stronger than any army. Terran, the compact officer, stepped among them, his eyes wide. He saw men and women tending to the wounded with rough hands but steady hearts. He saw young fighters sharpening blades beside older veterans who carried stories in their eyes. One human approached him, the same who had revealed himself in the warehouse. "You saw us fight," the man said simply. "Now you know we are not myths." Terran nodded slowly. "You are real. But why reveal yourselves now? Why join us in this war?" The man's gaze hardened. "Because the galaxy has forgotten who we are. Because they call us stories. Because it is time they remember humanity is not gone." Dominion fear in the Dominion fleet above Krezar IV. Officers argued over the recordings. "It cannot be humans," one insisted. "They are extinct. Extinct species do not destroy our walkers." Another replied bitterly. Even soldiers whispered behind their commanders' backs. Some refused to believe. Others were afraid. The more they denied, the more the fear grew. "They fight without fear of death," one soldier murmured. "What enemy can face such madness?" Compact division within the Compact Council. The debate was fierce. Some leaders welcomed the humans, believing their presence could inspire the people. Others distrusted them. "They appear from nowhere with no allegiance," one counselor argued. "What if they are using us for their own ends?" But on the front lines, the soldiers who had fought with humans had no such doubts. They had seen them bleed, laugh, and fight as brothers. They had seen the fire in their eyes. Whatever their purpose, Terran told his superiors, the humans fight with a courage we cannot deny. They have saved lives when all hope was lost. If they are using us, then let them. For without them, we are already defeated. The human message soon after the Battle of Krezar IV, a transmission spread across the stars. It was simple, spoken by a human standing before a backdrop of ruined stone. "We are humanity," he said. "You thought we were gone. You called us a story, but we are here. We are alive, and we do not bow, not to the Dominion, not to the Compact, not to anyone. We fight for survival. We fight for freedom. Remember us." The message shook the galaxy. The new legend on distant worlds. Children whispered the name human with wonder. Soldiers carried it like a banner in their hearts. Even those who had never seen them began to believe. The Dominion tightened its grip, desperate to crush the rumor before it grew. But fear had already taken root, and in the hidden colonies humanity prepared. They had shown their face. They had proven they were real. Now the galaxy would watch them on every battlefield. The myth had ended. The unveiling had begun. The revelation of humanity's return had sent shockwaves across the galaxy, but the war itself had not paused. Fleets clashed above shattered planets. Armies met on blasted fields, and chaos ruled in the empty space between stars. Yet where humans appeared, the course of battle began to change. Unlike any other species, humans did not follow the strict rules of war dictated by fleet formations, technology, or hierarchy. They fought unpredictably, not for orders but for survival, for each other, and for the stories of those who came before. Arrival at Tarkisiv on the barren world of Tarkis IV. The Dominion had gathered one of its largest garrisons. Its heavily fortified cities were considered unbreachable. The compact forces knew they could not win without aid, and humans had volunteered to join the defense. When the humans landed, they did not march in grand formations. They split into small teams, each moving silently through the rubble. Their weapons were diverse. Some carried plasma rifles scavenged from previous battles. Others wielded simple blades, traps, or explosives. But they carried more than tools. They carried ingenuity, courage, and a refusal to surrender. One young compact soldier named Lyra watched them with awe. "They move like ghosts," she whispered. "And yet every step seems planned." A human beside her smiled faintly. "It's not planning," he said. "It's adaptation. You survive by noticing everything. You fight by expecting nothing." The first strike. The humans began by attacking Dominion supply lines. They dismantled armored convoys using traps made from scrap metal, explosives, and clever misdirection. Dominion soldiers found themselves ambushed at every corner, often by fighters who seemed to vanish into thin air after a single strike. Lyra witnessed a team of humans approach a massive walker through a collapsed bridge. The walker's sensors detected them, but the humans moved too quickly. Using ropes, pulleys, and timing, they toppled the walker into the river below. Dominion soldiers who survived the fall ran screaming. "They are unstoppable," Lyra muttered. "How can they do this?" A human crouched beside her and said softly, "We do not wait for permission. We see a way and take it. That is all." Creative tactics humans did not rely on brute force. Instead, they adapted to every battlefield. In Tarkus, their foe's ruined city, they turned destroyed buildings into defensive mazes, funneling enemy forces into traps. Explosives were hidden in walls. Projectiles were disguised as debris. Even smoke and mirrors were used to confuse sensors. One Dominion commander fumed as his troops fell into yet another ambush. "Impossible," he growled. "No species fights like this. They think like machines, but they are flesh." Yet the humans were not machines. They laughed when things went wrong. They comforted one another when injuries occurred. Their camaraderie and spirit became a weapon no amount of technology could match. Compact soldiers inspired. Compact soldiers began to follow the humans' example. They learned quickly, watching how humans adapted, how they improvised, how they never allowed despair to take root. Lyra found herself alongside one human fighter named Karen. "Watch and learn," he said simply as he leapt onto a crumbling wall, disarming a hidden turret with nothing but a pole and rope. By nightfall, the city had been transformed. Dominion patrols moved cautiously, uncertain of where humans might strike next. The humans had made the ruins their ally, the streets their weapon, and their courage a shield for those who could not fight alone. The Dominion's confusion above the battlefield. Dominion fleet officers studied the humans. Reports were coming in faster than ever. Small teams were destroying supply lines, sabotaging communications, and appearing in places that should have been impossible. "They do not fight like any species I know," one officer admitted. "They do not rely on formations. They do not fear death. They do not retreat. Then what are they?" asked another. "Humans," the first officer said grimly. The legends were true. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion faced an enemy it could not predict. The humans' unpredictability became a weapon in itself, eroding the confidence of one of the galaxy's most feared armies. A human's perspective. In the ruins of Tarkus IV, Karen gathered a small team around a makeshift fire. Smoke curled up into the night sky, carrying the scent of burned metal and ash. "Why do we fight?" Lyra asked, watching him sharpen a blade. Karen looked at her with quiet intensity. "Because someone has to. Because if we do not, then others die. Because we survive not for glory or command, but for the people who cannot fight themselves." Lyra nodded slowly. She had seen fear in the eyes of Dominion soldiers. She had seen courage in the humans standing beside her. Somehow the humans made hope feel possible, even in a war that seemed endless. The turning point on the third day of battle, Dominion forces attempted a massive push. Walkers marched through the ruined streets, heavy artillery blasting everything in their path. The compact soldiers prepared for defeat, but the humans were ready. They had studied the city for days, noting every broken wall, every tunnel, every weak point. Small teams moved swiftly, planting explosives, collapsing bridges, and cutting off the enemy's advance. One human led a charge directly into a walker's sensors, drawing it into a trap. Another set fire to a storage depot filled with volatile fuel. The explosion rocked the city, scattering troops and forcing a retreat. By nightfall, the Dominion had withdrawn, their forces shaken and demoralized. For the first time in the war, the humans had turned a hopeless defense into a resounding victory. Compact morale. The soldiers of the Compact who had fought alongside humans were transformed. They spoke in awed whispers of the humans' courage and ingenuity. "They fight like nothing I've seen," one soldier said. "They do not follow orders," another replied. "They follow their hearts, and their hearts are stronger than anything the Dominion has." Terran, the officer who had once doubted the humans, now looked at them with respect. "They are not just warriors," he said quietly. "They are teachers, and today, we have learned how to fight like humans." The spread of hope news of Tarkus IV's defense spread across the compact coalition. Colonies that had prepared to surrender now rallied. Stories of human bravery became legends almost instantly. Children whispered the name human in awe. Soldiers cheered it in battle. Even planets far from the front lines began preparing for the humans' arrival, believing that where humans fought, hope followed. Dominion panic. The Dominion, however, responded with fear. High command strategists scrambled to adapt, but the human style was impossible to predict. Every countermeasure was met with new creative tactics. Their greatest machines were neutralized not with firepower, but with clever traps, ingenuity, and sheer courage. One Dominion officer admitted privately, "These are not just fighters. They are a force of nature. They cannot be measured. They cannot be stopped with rules or numbers. We are facing something entirely new." A quiet moment after the battle, Karen and his team gathered again around the fire. He looked at the young compact soldiers who had watched him fight. "You see now," he said softly, "the human way is not just in our weapons. It is in how we think, how we care for each other, how we refuse to be broken. That is why we survive and why the galaxy must remember us." Lyra, who had followed him into battle, nodded. "I understand. Humans fight differently, and now so will we." A new chapter. The victory at Tarkus IV became the first of many. Where humans fought, even hopeless battles became stories of courage. They did not claim lands, they did not seek glory, they only fought to survive and to inspire those who could not. The galaxy began to change. Soldiers who had never believed in legends now whispered one name with respect: humans. And the Dominion, for all its might, began to understand something they had never feared before. Unpredictability, courage, and unity could not be crushed by any fleet or weapon. Humanity was no longer a forgotten species. They were a living force reshaping the battlefield and the hearts of those who witnessed them, and their story was only beginning. The war that had once consumed the galaxy was changing. The Valar Dominion and the Zerath Compact continued their endless struggle, but everywhere humans fought, the tide of battle shifted. Fleets faltered. Armies hesitated. Rumors of humanity's return had become undeniable fact. No longer a myth, humanity was now a force that could shape worlds. The battle for Korvax Station, a massive orbital hub controlling trade and travel across a cluster of systems, had long been a Dominion stronghold. Its defenses were considered nearly impossible to breach. The compact forces, though stronger in numbers this time, feared a direct assault. But humans had another plan. Small teams moved silently across space, slipping past patrols and stolen craft. They struck at weak points, power conduits, communication arrays, and supply depots. Every move was calculated yet unpredictable. Dominion officers could not anticipate their strategy. One human fighter named Arden led a strike team to the station's central hub. As alarms blared, his team bypassed security locks using devices they had scavenged from years of survival. They disabled turrets, sealed blast doors, and created confusion in the Dominion ranks. From above, compact forces watched in awe as the humans struck again and again. Each small success caused larger ripples, forcing Dominion soldiers to retreat from strategic positions. Dominion panic. Inside Korvax Station, the Dominion commander raged. "How can they—" he shouted, slamming a fist against the console. "They are everywhere, and yet nowhere. Impossible." His officers were terrified. Reports kept coming. Humans dismantling defenses, disabling communications, and rallying compact troops. Each time the Dominion thought they had captured or eliminated a human team, the fighters reappeared in a different sector. "They fight without fear," one officer whispered, "and they fight as one, like a storm that cannot be stopped." Even the Chancellor, who had mocked the humans from the beginning, felt a chill. "We underestimated them," he admitted in private. "This is no myth. This is reality, and reality has teeth." Humans inspire the compact on the station. The compact soldiers began to follow the humans' lead. They learned from every action how to turn ruined corridors into ambush points, how to use limited resources creatively, how to fight with courage instead of only relying on superior weapons. Lyra, now seasoned from previous battles, moved alongside Arden's team. She carried a scavenged rifle, but her focus was on observing and learning. How do they do it? she asked, watching a human disarm a turret using only a small pole and timing. Arden looked at her and smiled. They do not fight the way others do. They fight for each other. That is their strength. And now you will fight the same way. The turning tide. By the end of the first day of the assault on Korvax Station, the Dominion forces had suffered heavy losses. Key systems had been disabled and morale was collapsing. Humans were not just soldiers. They were symbols. Soldiers across the galaxy who had doubted themselves began to believe. Colonists who had feared the Dominion's wrath now fought with hope. And the Compact's own leaders realized that with humans as allies, even impossible odds could be overcome. The humans did not seek glory or recognition. They did not claim the station for themselves. They fought to survive, to inspire, and to protect those who could not fight alone. A Dominion desperate counter. The Dominion, realizing the humans' impact, attempted a new tactic. They deployed an elite strike team, hoping to capture or eliminate the human fighters and crush the Compact's morale. Arden and his team anticipated this. Using tunnels, abandoned maintenance shafts, and hidden corridors, they lured the strike team into traps. Explosives, smoke, and clever distractions dismantled the elite forces one by one. The Dominion officers watched in disbelief as the humans turned their most feared units into chaos and defeat. They are unstoppable, one officer whispered. Every plan we make, they have already found a way around it. Humanity becomes a legend. As news of Korvax Station's defense spread, the galaxy began to change its perception of humans. No longer dismissed as myths, humans became symbols of courage, adaptability, and survival. Stories of their battles were shared across systems, inspiring soldiers, traders, and civilians alike. Children whispered the name human with reverence. Soldiers cheered it on battlefields. Even those who had never seen a human now knew they existed, and feared the power that such unpredictability could bring. The human perspective. After the battle, Arden gathered his team. They were exhausted, but their spirits were high. Another victory, Lyra said, smiling despite the dirt and burns on her face. Arden shook his head. Not a victory, he said. A step. Every battle is a step. The galaxy is watching now. They know we exist, and they will not forget again. Another human fighter added, We do not fight for fame or control. We fight to remind the galaxy of what humanity is, and that is enough. The Aftermath Compact forces rebuilt quickly. Where humans had fought, cities were defended. Colonies were fortified. Soldiers were trained not only in weapons but in human ways, adaptation, ingenuity, and courage. Dominion fleets began to hesitate, unsure where the humans would strike next. Their soldiers feared every shadow, every ruined street, every unknown corridor. The humans had not only changed the battlefield, they had changed the minds of their enemies. A message to the galaxy from a rebuilt station. Arden broadcasted a message across the cluster. Humanity is not a story. We are alive. We do not serve any empire. We fight for survival, for freedom, and for each other. Remember us. When you see us, know this. We are humans, and we will not be forgotten. The broadcast reached every world, every fleet, and every colony. The galaxy paused to listen. For the first time in centuries, humans were more than myths. They were real. They were powerful. They were unstoppable. And they were a force to be reckoned with. A new era. The war continued, but the presence of humans reshaped it completely. Battles once considered hopeless were now winnable. Fleets moved cautiously. Armies prepared for cunning strategies, and civilians dared to hope again. Across the galaxy, soldiers whispered the name human with awe. Traders carried tales of human ingenuity. Leaders understood that humanity was no longer a legend. It was a force that could unite, inspire, and terrify. Even the Dominion, with all its might, began to change its tactics. It was no longer enough to rely on numbers and technology. They had to consider the unpredictable, the clever, the bold, qualities embodied by humanity. Standing together on a small hill overlooking a rebuilt colony, Arden, Lyra, and other human fighters watched the sun rise. The smoke of battle had cleared, and the world looked peaceful, almost like it had before the war began. Lyra turned to Arden. We have done more than survive, she said softly. We have changed the galaxy, Arden nodded. Yes, and we will continue. Humanity does not stop. We adapt, we survive, and we fight. Not for glory, but for those who cannot. The others nodded, understanding that this was only the beginning. Humanity's story was no longer forgotten. Their legend was now real, and the galaxy would remember it forever. The galaxy's warning, across systems, leaders sent messages. A single warning repeated in fear and respect. Do not underestimate humans. They are no myth. They are alive, and they will fight. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy understood. Humans were not fragile. Humans were not stories. Humans were a force capable of changing everything. And as they moved forward step by step, battle by battle, humanity became the living proof that survival, courage, and ingenuity could conquer even the greatest odds. The legend had returned. The myth was real, and humanity had claimed its place among the stars.